Welcome to the Liberating Joy in Learning podcast. I'm Robert Beckstrand, and last time that we were here, we finished up our first season of podcasts discussing the starter principles that help us find joy in learning. Now, in this next season, we're going to discuss primary lenses, which come from part one of the book Liberating Perspectives in the Learning Liberated Workbook. But first, we're going to define a term. During this podcast, we're going to talk about the term is growing desires. Now, that may be self-explanatory to some and may not be to others, but so we're all on the same page with this term. A growing desire is that first initial spark within us that prompts us to seek learning and growth. So, first question to ask, what growing desires have you had?
Well, we've talked about a lot of them during this podcast, right?
Right, we have talked about some of them.
Learning to play disc golf is something you and I are both still trying to. Not as much now that it's darker, but we can still do it.
We've talked about you learning to first read with your mom.
Right.
I've talked about learning to play the cello or learning to play the guitar.
Right, playing the piano.
Playing the piano, yeah.
I've always wanted to learn how to take care of plants better.
Right.
But I don't like going outside very much, so I don't take care of plants. It's like sometimes you have desires that you kind of think, oh, I wish I could do that, but it's not something you really want to put energy into. So there's a lot of different kinds of growing desires that you can have.
Right.
So think about what growing desires do you have? Just think about all of them.
Right.
So what we do right from the beginning with growing desires charts the course for how that desire will be met. Growing desires are developed by using primary lenses. These are lenses or perspectives through which we understand and fulfill our growing desires. So here they are. Ready? The first one is wondering shamelessly. The second one is claiming our learning. Third is owning our failures and successes. Fourth is stretching upward, inward, and outward. Fifth is tuning into learning seasons. Sixth is working with resistance. And seventh is training with a mentor.
Now, as we go through these, a lot of these may seem familiar to you. You may have thought about them in different ways. But to begin with, when have you used any of these in your learning? And that's a good question to think about. Have you used these at all in your learning? Right.
A lot of us, we'll set a goal, right? Setting a goal is a lot like that, claiming our learning. Right?
Yeah, that'd be the first one. A lot of us have done the seventh. I think I've done that a few times, training with a mentor. First job I ever had. I considered my first boss a mentor because of what I learned from him.
Right. So some of the others are are not some that we're as familiar with.
But they're all very important in the learning process.
Right. And they all make learning more joyful, right? That's what this podcast is all about. When we use all of these, when we understand all of them, then learning is more joyful. And, in the last 10, 12 years that I've been doing this, I can attest that learning is more joyful for me. When I have a challenge, I am a lot more willing to say, okay, these are my weaknesses. It's fine. I can, that's only a small part of facing our weaknesses is only a tiny part of learning. And I think that's certainly one thing that a lot of people struggle with. I don't want to learn something new because I don't want to have to face my weaknesses.
Right.
But in the context of all of the 7 different primary lenses, that's just a small part, right? And we can find more joy because we understand the full perspective of the learning process.
Right. Now, just a couple notes on primary lenses. As you learn about the primary lenses, watch for when one or another might benefit your learning and use them when you feel so inspired to. The more you use them, the more you'll understand them. And also keep in mind that no primary lens works in isolation of any other. And finding greater clarity in any primary lens hones and enhances our insights into other lenses.
So also, remember the starter principles. Like we had the first series of podcasts that we did were all about the starter principles. And so allow yourself time to ponder and play around with each primary lens. If you find that you don't actually want to learn something, allow yourself the freedom to let it go. Trust your heart and mind to use these primary lenses by intentionally choosing to use them and by using them when your intuition prompts you to. Talk to others about them to get their perspective on them and watch for how they improve your joy in learning.
Right. Now, so let's go ahead and we're going to start on the first one. and that is wondering shamelessly. Now, wondering shamelessly, wondering shamelessly, that's a big mouthful. The first primary lens in Learning Liberated is for everyone at the wonderful place where one wonders about new possibilities for themselves. Wonder is the beginning of insight, understanding, relief, and the wisdom for each of us who take the time to utilize its power. That's something that is very important to understand, that when we are wondering about something, that's the first stage of learning.
Yes.
And when we get excited, we're wondering about something, and we're excited about that's what we need to use the impetus to get us going on learning.
Right, and take time and enjoy it.
Right.
Right? There's no, well, go ahead, finish the next quote.
Verena has mentioned that she regularly ponders this question from Bradley Stats. Is that his name?
I don't actually know how to say his name, but that's
It's Staats.
Yes.
And this question is, given the power that comes from asking questions, why do we so often rush to an answer? And that's a great question. Asking questions is always a great place to start, but let's not rush past that question.
Yeah, take time to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And just consider all of the different ways that you could answer that question.
Yeah.
And how they differ from day to day, right? I might answer the question differently
Right.
tomorrow or next
Right.
week or next year or in 10 years. It's okay to have a different answer to a question. And it's a benefit to us, right?
Right. So, for instance, what questions do you regularly ask yourself? I mean, each day I ask myself, why do I want to get up and go to work? That may not be the right question to ask.
And there's nothing wrong with asking that, right? You may
Yeah.
consider, okay, I've got this project that I'm working on that I
Yeah.
really love. I love the people that I work with or whatever. There's a lot
Right.
of different ways to answer that, not just in a cynical one, even though it comes out that way.
Yeah, sometimes.
And that's okay, right?
But what other questions do we regularly ask ourselves? That's something to think about. You may not have an answer right now, but think about, what do you regularly ask yourself?
Right, and the power of those, right? And if
Right.
it's a question you don't want to keep asking, stop asking it,
Right.
right? Like, question that's often asked is, why did I do that?
Right.
And maybe we don't need to ask that as often as we, if it's something that we're
Right.
embarrassed about or whatever, there's no reason to belabor it.
Or if we ask ourselves, why did I do that? Ask it and then move on. You may
Yeah.
not know the answer. And that's
Right.
what this wondering shamelessly is all about is, it's okay to ask a question and not get an answer right away.
Right. Right. Okay, so that takes us to the next little part. Rushing to an answer prevents us from the benefit of pondering a wide variety of answers to our questions over time and can lead to shame. Brené Brown explains that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. When we can let go of shame and cling to a hope in our ability to learn more effectively, and when we regularly and shamelessly ask lots of questions, we liberate joy in learning. The primary work of wondering is to pay attention, ask questions, and to do so shamelessly. So, how do you answer these questions? The ones that we talked about earlier. Do you feel shame when you ask yourself questions about learning?
I don't. Maybe because I don't. And part of it is maybe we don't always realize that we're asking questions we sometimes get so caught up in our day-to-day activities of going back and forth to work and doing our projects or dealing with people that I think sometimes forget to wonder, just to sit and ponder the stars. Or the sound of rain. We take time. We don't take time to stop and ask questions and to wonder about stuff.
Right.
Other than what's immediately around us.
Right. And we don't very often wonder about our learning. I wish I
Right.
could, without shame, right?
Exactly.
So I wish I could learn how to take care of my plants better. Well, how am I going to get myself outside more? Without shame, right?
Right.
Like, this is where I'm at. And it's okay if it takes me 10 years to learn how to take care of indoor plants.
Right.
There's no right or wrong when it comes to learning.
Right.
And we just need to keep asking the questions to keep us going.
Right.
So, all right. So just to wrap things up, and because I love this quote so much, Bradley Stott says, again, given the power that comes from asking questions, why do we so often rush to an answer? So I challenge you to spend time wondering about your growing desires and watch for any feelings of discomfort that creep in that might feel like shame. Next time, we'll talk more about the power of wondering shamelessly. This
Right.
is just, the beginning.
Yeah.
I think.
The thing that we want to emphasize through this next season of podcasts is we have these 7 learning primary lenses, and there is a lot involved with each one of those, and we're going to try to spend as much time as we need to go through them so you understand what they are and how they can be useful. So we're not just going to hit one each episode.
Right.
We're not sure about how long it's going to take.
We don't know, and some will take less time than others.
Yes.
But particularly Wondering Shamelessly, that's where it all starts. So think about this week, and remember, send your questions or comments to learnandliberated@gmail.com. Have a great week.
Bye.